Good day and welcome. We're glad to have you. We will begin our session at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. So you still have time to get coffee or something to drink. Again, we will begin our session at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. Again, welcome. Welcome everyone. Good day, good afternoon, good evening to some of you, depending on where you're dialing in from. We're going to start in another 2 minutes. We want to allow others to join us. Again, we're glad to have you. Welcome. We'll start at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. So another 2 minutes. Still got time to go grab coffee or water. We're glad to have you. Welcome. Good day and welcome everyone. Again, welcome. Come on in to class. Again, welcome. We'll give them another 20 seconds and we'll get started. Just by show of hands, how many of you joined me yesterday in class? All right, quite a few of us. That sounds good. Thank you. For those of you that did not join me yesterday, how many of you have had the fundamentals course? Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Grayson. All right, just trying to get a level set of how we're going to gauge this course. Thank you so much for all participating. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome again. My name is Odell Gordon. I am a technical trainer here at Sumo Logic. I am based out of the Midwest, based out of the suburbs of Illinois here, of Chicago, pardon me, in Illinois. A little bit about my background for those of you that were not with me or haven't taken a training course with me. I've been in IT for about 30 years now, 30 plus years to be honest. And I started out way long time ago in the data center operations. Then I moved up to database design, database administration, database management. And again, my career stems around data. I've been, for the last 15 years, I've been doing technical training. I really enjoy that. So that's my background. Hopefully you're somewhere comfortable. It's going to be a balmy 83 degrees here where I am. We'll go ahead and get started. If you'd like to share where you're from in the chat, you're more than welcome to do that. And I'll share that in as well. Okay. So again, you're joining us today for our Search Mastery certification course. Okay, if you've taken the fundamentals course, you had a little bit of dealing with the operators. I introduced you, or the trainer introduced you to the operators. In this course, we're going to go way more in depth. Thanks, Charlie. Charlie's in from Minneapolis. All right, Midwest guy. Thanks, Charlie. Michael's from Poland. Oh, okay. All right. Glad to have you. And Greg's UK. Oh, 82 degrees there. Okay, great in the UK. We got a DC, Canada, Kansas City. Thanks, John. Philly. Another Poland. Thank you. Nashville. All right. How about them ribs? Toronto. I love it up there. Great. Thanks for sharing. Let's go ahead and get started. Indiana, Midwest. Thank you. So what we're going to do in this course, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to give you an introduction and give you the objectives. Then you or I will go right into our training environment. We're going to allow you to log into our training environment. And just to digress for a moment, I tell students, you have access to our training environment until the password changes the first Monday of the next month. So again, after you get through taking training, go out there and play, and still you have that opportunity. Okay. Anyhow, you and I are going to log into the training environment. We're going to do some searching, parsing, and we're going to look at FERs. Now, let me go ahead and tell you what that acronym represents now, in case it appears on the exam somewhere. Field extraction rule. We're going to go over those. We're going to show you where they are, etc. Okay. Then we'll get into some conditional formatting, filtering operations. Excuse me, we'll get into some conditional queries, and then we'll get into filtering operations. We'll plot objects on a map. We'll format our results. We're looking at some moving and rolling averages. We'll identify some trends, outliers, and comparisons, and then we'll end up creating an alert. Okay. Then you will have the opportunity to get certified again. All right. Now, of course, after you take the certification exam and pass it, we, of course, will give you the opportunity to fill out the form so you can receive your Uber Eats $15 voucher. Okay, so again, we're happy and excited that you joined us, and we want to reward you for it. All right, so I'll go over these slides rather quickly. There's like 4 slides that are kind of in all of the beginning of our courses. So some of you may see these. Again, I'm just going to hit the high points because we have a lot of programming to do with these operators. I'm also going to save us some bandwidth and hide my face, turn off my video, so you can focus on the lecture and the slides. So again, these are examples of dashboards that can be created in our tool. We give these dashboards names so you can get a big picture idea of what these dashboards represent. So for example, if we wanted to find out the health of our systems, all of our systems, we can find out that from a dashboard. If we want to find out the mean time and the resolve time, we can find that out as well. So again, we can build a dashboard from an operational perspective. From a security perspective, we can, of course, build a dashboard that allows us to find out where users are logging in from, if they're logging in simultaneously from different places, anyone that has used root access. Again, we can find out that type of information from a dashboard for a security perspective. From our business perspective, again, here we can find out if we had a marketing campaign, how successful or not was it. We can find out what web pages users are often frequently using, what products are they ordering. Again, we can glean that information from a business intelligence dashboard. And then finally, globally, we can compare our data to other companies' data globally, worldwide, okay? So those are 4 examples of dashboards that can be created in the CIP, the Continuous Intelligence Platform. Now, those dashboards are built off of queries, and the queries are built off of data. The data that we're going to use is yours, your machine data that you're collecting, those logs, those metrics, those traces. All of that information that you're collecting, whether it's coming from any source, cloud, SaaS, mobile, third party, wherever your data is coming from, we're going to collect that and use it and allow you to search and parse through it. We offer analytics. Again, we're a multi-tenancy environment, which means we have multiple apps in there. We're a secure environment. You see our certifications over to the right. Some companies like to incorporate Sumo logic in their environment, so they utilize the application programming interfaces, the APIs. You're going to see some machine learning and advanced analytics today as well. I did show that in the fundamentals, but we're going to get into it a little bit more in depth. Again, if your company ever needs to grow, what they increase their size or downgrade their size, again, we're elastic. We can meet your needs. Finally, again, we're giving you a single solution, a single platform that you can share your findings across all lines of your business, okay? So again, those the high level, the 4 takeaways. You can build dashboards. We're using your data. We offer analytics, and you can share your findings of what you find in your tool, in the tool. Again, another slide that's in our fundamentals course, giving you the high level. I often like to lean on students' imagination. I want you to imagine a highway. Again, we're thinking about a highway because we need a vehicle to get your data into our Sumo Logic cloud-based environment. The vehicle that we use is a collector. Do any of you remember the 2 types of collectors? There's one. Thank you. Install and host it. Thank you very much. Awesome. So again, if you haven't taken and learned more about data collectors, we're going to do some of that tomorrow in our admin course for those of you that are joining us. Okay. Again, this is the vehicle or the mechanism that's going to be used to get your data into our environment. It encrypts, compresses, and sends. Again, it defines your sources. You and I are going to spend all of our time on this piece here, where we're going to use the operators and visualize by displaying our output and charts, building dashboards and alerts. Okay, so that's the flow. Get the data in, search through it, use operators, display it in different chart types, build dashboards so you can set up alerts and monitor. when your logs, your metrics, your traces, when all your data comes into Sumo, it actually gets tagged, okay? And you want to be able to grab it so you can search through it and parse through it, okay? So here's a list of metadata tags that allow you to grab it. The one that we're going to focus on and continue to use is the one in bold. That's the recommended one, source category. It's freely configurable. For example, I can set it equal to underscore source category equal to prod Apache era. So I want to bring back all of my era messages from my production Apache. Or maybe I want it dev Apache era. So again, it can be freely configured. That'll be the one we'll use most often. All right, so again, any questions? I know I went through those slides rather quickly, ladies and gentlemen. But again, those are slides that are in our fundamentals course, and a lot of people have taken that already. Any questions before we get started? All right, so you are going to be allowed to log into our training environment, okay? I need you all to think of a 3-digit number. Thank you, Josh. Awesome. And yeah, and put it in the chat. So any 3-digit number from 1 to 999. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, guys. You guys are awesome. All right, now I am going to share the credentials of how you're going to log into our training environment. You're going to open up a browser. Thank you all for sharing. I appreciate that. Yes, you can use the same number from yesterday. No worries. Good question. There's our credentials. For those of you that have not joined us before, you're going to open up a browser. You are going to type in the service.sumologic.com. That's what you're going to type in your browser. Okay. That leads you to our training environment landing page. It is going to prompt you, of course, to add your email address. And that email address is going to be training, which is what I put, the credentials I put in the chat, the plus symbol, the word analyst, and your number. Okay, at sumologic.com. The password, of course, is uppercase F, fireworks, exclamation mark. Make sure I didn't fat finger it. I didn't. It's okay, ladies and gentlemen. If you had the class yesterday and you want to use the same number, same environment, it's okay. It's fine. You can do that. Awesome. All right, now, please confirm in the chat that you're able to log in. I don't want to leave anyone. Thank you, Alec. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, John. Let me know if you're not able to log in, please. Let me know if you're not able to log in. Yes, Jeremy, any number you want. Thank you, Harrell. Hopefully I didn't mispronounce your name. Thank you. Thank you, Ian. All right, so again, I don't want to leave anyone. That's why I'm taking the time to make sure we're all on the same page. All right, now just a real quick 350-degree high-level review. I'm not going to go in depth on the CIP. Again, if you came into the environment and you saw Sumo Logic and you saw a stack of blueberry pancakes, if you take your mouse off of it, it's buttermilk. If you hover over, it's blueberry. If you saw that, you can expand your navigation panel. You click on the arrow, that hides it. Now, we're not really going to use the navigation panel, so you can hide it, really, ladies and gentlemen. You don't really need it right now, okay? If you came in the environment and you had a bunch of tabs open, maybe someone else used the training environment. So maybe you see a bunch of tabs up top, okay? So what you can do is go to any one of those tabs, click on the 3 dots, and close all of the tabs. Now, you and I need to get to our training material. We need to get to our lab guide, okay? Now, there's multiple ways of doing this. Go ahead, Abi. What's your question? Put it in the chat. Go ahead. What's your question? There's multiple ways of doing this. So I want to do it the easiest way that I think to me. I just go into the documentation. So I'm on the Learn link, the Home tab Learn link. And you should see 6 boxes down there. I'm going to click on the documentation. If you feel like opening up a browser and typing in help.sumologic.com is faster, you can use that approach as well, okay? Once you come to our Doc Hub page, you can go down in the Start box and click on the Quick Start Labs and Tutorials. Once you come to the Quick Start Labs and Tutorials, you and I are about to go through the Search Mastery. So we can click on that. And I'll go ahead and put that in the chat for you. Okay. And let's see here. So everybody's in, right? Hopefully nobody is having any trouble there. I'll leave the credentials in here just in case someone couldn't get in. Let me know. All right. So if you're in a Google Chrome environment, one of the advantages that we have is we can, and you can do this in other environments as well, but I know we're using this one. So I'm just going to right click on my hands-on labs and pin it. That moves it to the front. And here, the advantage of it being pinned is I can toggle between my CIP, my continuous intelligence platform, and my lab guide. Okay, just being able to toggle quickly through them. Okay. All right. So if we click on the introduction for the hands-on search mastery, this really just talks about you logging in. Okay, so we're already logged into our training environment. That's what that overview is all about, that introduction. All right. Now we want to go ahead and click on the search basic metadata and keywords. Let's click on that link. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we take you rather slowly to kind of help build your confidence, and then we pick up speed, okay? So hang in there with me. Now in this lab, we want to use our metadata and keywords to narrow here. The key thing we're doing here, ladies and gentlemen, is narrowing our scope, and we're improving performance. So we're an analyst. We need to search through these all of this data, the logs, the metrics, whatever. We need to search through it. We need to understand how. Okay. So let's go ahead and let's grab the query under number 1. Let's just highlight and copy. Okay. We're going to do a lot of that highlight and copying. Okay. So I'm just going to right click and click on that and say copy. Okay. We're going to run this here query for the last 15 minutes. So let's go back to the CIP. No matter where you are in the CIP, just click on the blue new button. Just click on that new button for me. And you want to do a log search. As a reminder, if you get any informational messages, just close them out. As a reminder, when you create a new log search, it's going to default to the last 15 minutes. All right. Let's go ahead and paste our expression in the query here. And let me digress for a moment. You can go ahead and paste, but let me digress. You notice when we click our cursor in the actual query area, we get a pop-up of metadata tags. So we could do a click where it allows us to click ahead. Abi, go ahead and put your question in the chat. You're raising your hand. All right, so if I click on search category and I type it, you don't have to do this, I'm just digressing here. And I go ahead and type in Apache, whoops, get my fat fingers here. Put the slash there. So typically it will allow you to just click ahead, and that's what I need to do here. Apache, I think it's labs, that's the problem. Sorry about that, labs, Apache, and see, I can just click on it. So I just wanted to really show you that you'll have that capability as you start getting comfortable with the tool. Anyhow, I digress. Let's get back to where you are. I'm pasting in. So all we're doing is using that favorite metadata tag, and we're going to look at our access from our lab. So our access logs from our lab, okay, over the last 15 minutes. Let's go ahead and run that. All right, so let's remember what we see, okay? So first we see a histogram, a minute by minute breakdown, okay? Then underneath the histogram, we see our status, it's done, the elapsed time, and the total amount of results, okay? Your session ID is there if you need it. You then see your messages tab in your field browser. It has two fields it's going to display. Over to the right, you see the time and the message. We're looking at page 1 of 290 pages, okay? Now, let's go ahead and append to this expression. Let's add a space, and let's type in an optional item. And, Odell, it's case insensitive, ladies and gentlemen, case insensitive. So we're using the and you know, some of you know from fundamentals that the and is optional. So it's not mandatory that we put it there, but we're putting it there for readability and to understand. So after we type the and, we're going to type in a keyword. So you're adding a space and you're typing in the number 404. So what this message is going to do, it's going to look at all of my access messages and bring back all of the messages that have the keyword 404 in them over the last 15 minutes. Let's go ahead and run that. You're going to notice you get 200 or so pages. I'm seeing page 1 of 11. And if I scroll through these 25 items, I can see that their 404s are highlighted. Hey, Odell, you said that and is optional. Can I see it run without the and? Sure. I'm going to take the and off. But remember, if you were a trainer and you were training somebody this, they're going to say, well, what is the 404 doing? Okay, but the and kind of gives it some type of context. But again, it still works. Just remember, if it ever appears on an exam, the ands are optional. I'm going to put it back and run it so you can visually see it. All right. Now, let's take it one step further, ladies and gentlemen. Let's highlight the 404 and let's replace it with an open paren, the word error. We'll type in the operator or, we'll type in the word check, and we'll use a while card and add a closing paren. Okay. So again, oops, that's right. Oh, that's right. If we read this query, what it's saying, it's using my favorite metadata tag. It's bringing back my access log messages from my lab environment. And it is using a keyword of error or anything that begins with CHECK. Okay. And we're going to run that for the last 15 minutes. So again, we can look at our status bar. It's done. The amount of records is 132 records. Again, if I scroll through this 1 of 6 pages, I can see the word checkout is highlighted because we're using the while card. And if there were any messages that had error in them, you would see those highlighted as well. Okay. So good question, Charlie. If you're looking like you want to do more than one number, so think about SQL, and maybe you want to do an N operator in 404 and 200, or maybe you want to do equal 400. There's multiple ways you can do it, okay? But yes, you can do that. All right, let's continue on, ladies and gentlemen. Let's replace everything after, let me do this correctly, everything after Apache bracket. So highlight everything after Apache bracket and replace that with the word error. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to query another source. For the first three examples, we were querying our access log messages. Now we're looking at our error log messages. And one other stipulation here. We want to look at our error log messages for the last 45 minutes. So you go over here to your time and you see it's 15 minutes. That's the default. You click on it. You don't see a relative time of 45 minutes. You could go to recent, and if it's there, you could use it. But if it's not there, Odell, how do I make up my own time? Okay. So the first thing is, ladies and gentlemen, you highlight whatever's there. If you can't highlight, click off of it, click back on it. Okay. So it's highlighted. You start out with a minus symbol. You must start out with a minus symbol. You put in your numeric value, 45, and we'll use M for minute, H for days. You'll get a little pop-up that kind of gives you the orange pop-up that gives you that, but we're doing minutes. Okay. So again, you type in your number, you put in M for minutes, D for days, and so forth. Okay. So we're going to look at our error log messages for the last 45 minutes. Let's run that. Now, what I want you to pay attention to, ladies and gentlemen, is, let me just do this real quickly. I'm going to digress. I want to do this real quickly so it's easier to show you this way. Just watch me. Okay, don't do anything. All right. I want to show you there's a difference in the way these messages are formatted. That's all I want to do. You don't have to do anything, just watch. Okay. So I'm running the access messages for the last 15 minutes. It doesn't matter about the time. I want you to look at something. The way these messages are from my access logs are formatted IP address, date. If I look at my messages from my error, they are date, and they may or may not have an IP address after client. So I just wanted to point that out to you. It's going to be important as we go further. Anyhow, I digressed. We just ran our messages. We can see we have, over so many amount of messages. We're looking at page 1 of so many. Okay. Now let's continue on. I'm back here together with you. Let's add a space. Let's type in the operator or. Okay. And again, if you want to type, you can type, but I'm just going to choose source category. Okay. And I want to use my, of course, I wanted to use my lab. So I'll start typing /Apache, and then I can see my access. So your screen should look just like mine, similar, maybe you use a different case. It should read underscore source category equals labs Apache error, or underscore source category equals labs Apache access. So basically, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to bring back both error and access. That's what that's going to do. Okay. Let's go ahead and run this. It's going to do it for the last 45 minutes. Let's run it. So I'm seeing over 28,000 messages. I'm looking at page 1 of over 1,000 pages. If I scroll through here and look at these messages, I can see it's going to indicate where it came from. So a lot of these came from error. If I go through it, I can essentially see some access messages, etc. So I want you to get kind of comfortable with the messages. Okay. I am going to introduce you to a technique. We're going to talk more about the technique later, I just want to introduce it to you right now. So we have two sources, okay? It may be, something needed where you need to know how this is broken down by what percentage is each source in all of these 28,000 records. So the technique that you can use, I want you to watch me first. In my field browser, you can click on the word, not the checkbox, just the word. So if I click on source category, oh, of these 28,000 messages, 23,000 of them are access and 5,000 of them are error. 80% of my results are from access. 19% is from error. Odell, how did you do that? All I did was just click on the name and clicked on it again to hide it. So that little technique is something you might need later. But anyhow, getting back to our actual queries here. So we're looking at both error and access, all right? Let's continue on with this. Let's highlight everything after the first occurrence of Apache bracket. Highlight everything after that. And let's replace that with an asterisk. So that's essentially a wildcard. That's telling me to bring back everything under the labs Apache directory, okay, over the last 45 minutes. So you may not know this, but we really only have two sources. So it's basically going to bring back the same thing that we saw before. It's going to bring back all of my Apache and all of my access. Okay. Well, I don't believe you, Odell. Well, I just showed you a technique. You can always click on the word source category in your field browser. And of course, it's going to give you a breakdown of what we did. So everything under Apache, I only have access and error, and this is the breakdown. Okay. All right, so let's just quickly go back over to the lab guide so I can demonstrate what we've done. Okay, we've done number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. Okay, we now are about to do number 7. Go ahead and highlight it. Go back to the CIP, create a new live tail, and paste and run. Now, let me give you some hints about the live tail. I did it quickly because some of you are going to run into a problem. So we've set a governor on live tails. You can only run 10 concurrent live tails at once. So it's more than 10 of us in class. So if we all run that expression, we're going to run into an error where, there's 10 live tails already ran. So no big deal. You'll get the opportunity to do it. Again, you can see the live tail. Odell, you didn't tell us what the live tail was. The live tail is a query that's displaying the messages as they're being ingested into Sumo logic. So this is more of an administrator's, I would say administrator do something like this because they're seeing the data as it's being ingested in Sumo logic. That's what a live tail does for you, okay? Now, let's kind of embellish on this a little bit. Notice that I have the keyword 404, but it's not highlighted anywhere, but these are 404 messages. If you look through each of them, they're 404s. If you go over to the right of that big blue running box, if you go over to the right, you should see an A for highlight. Now, if I click on that A and type in 404 and hit the enter key, now, as messages are being ingested, they're going to be highlighted. Okay, so again, I wanted to quickly show you that. One other thing I want to show you as well, you can do things like this as well, not necessarily only in your log searches, but you can also do this in your live tails. Okay, I'm using a wild card. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and get out of the live tails in case some of you want to run it and you don't have that capability because we're at our threshold. Okay, so I'll get out of it. All right, going back to the lab guide, that was the last thing we did. We did a live tail. All right, now let's go over the quiz. I like going over the quiz questions, and I'm emphasizing this for those of you that might take self-paced courses. I still like going over the lab questions because it gives you the quiz questions because it gives you an idea what might be asked in the exam. Okay, so let's go over in these lab questions. True or false, ladies and gentlemen? Keywords are case sensitive. Greg, Alec, Michael, okay, you guys are all correct. That's false. If you've taken a class with me, you've heard my voice emphasize case insensitive, right? So again, keywords are case insensitive, all right? Question number 2, and is implicit and ors are explicit. Abby, correct. You're correct, Abby. Michael, yep. Greg, yep, that's true. You saw me, some of you saw me earlier. I removed the and because it's implied, and we have to physically use the or because it's explicit. So again, it's true. All right, question number 3. Keywords and metadata can use wildcards for live tab. Absolutely. I just demonstrated that. Absolutely. That's correct. That's correct. All right. Good job, ladies and gentlemen. So that's that slow pace that we took. Let's go ahead in the bottom right corner of this lab guide number 1. Let's go ahead and click on lab 2. It says simple parsing, grouping, and filtering. Let's go into that. All right, so here we're going to learn about operators. We're going to learn about parsing and grouping. Now, let me bring up parsing. Let me digress for a moment. Again, I tell people, I don't know everything in this tool. I have a resource, and I'm going to share that resource with you. You don't need to do this, okay? My resource is called help.sumologic.com. Help.sumologic.com. That's my resource, okay? Now here, I want to go out and look at parse operators, okay? It brings up a bunch of list of items, but I want to look at all of my parse operators. What does this tool offer, okay? Again, I'm just digressing. Again, I see that there's different types of parse operators. There's anchor, regex, JSON, etc. Don't be afraid to go out here and search for this and get this, and you might need this, okay? Now, I want to distinguish something real quickly here. There's 2 types of anchors that we're going to use in this class. It's either a parse anchor, excuse me, there's 2 types of parsing. There's parse anchor or parse regex. Parse anchor, you might have learned from me in fundamentals, is position based. Parse regex is not position based, okay? Be aware of this, use it, pin it, whatever you need to do, remember about it, okay? All right, going back to my lab guide. We're on lab 2. Let's go to search our Apache logs, both the access and the error logs, for the last 15 minutes, and then count by source. So let's highlight what's in number 1, go create back to our CIP, create a new log search. Odell, do I need those other tabs? Nope. You don't have to keep them going because you're going to end up having tabs all across the page. So it's up to you, whatever you want to do, okay? All right, so I am, of course, going to comment out. If you haven't been with me, to comment out a row of code, you use the // so this line will not run, okay? Again, if I look at the top line that will run, it reads underscore source category equals labs Apache asterisk. So that means bring back everything under the Apache. You guys are familiar with that. So I'm just running that line of code. And of course, I'm getting my Apache errors, and I'm getting my Apache access as well, okay? Now, just to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, right here, With these results, I cannot display them on a chart. I cannot. In order to display my results on a chart, okay, I need an aggregate, okay? Min, max, average, count, sum. Those are aggregates. Now, I want you to take a moment and look at this. We're telling the tool to bring back everything under Apache. We're using the pipe symbol on the next line to tell the tool, continue my expression. Count by underscore source. Now, here's the question. Where is this underscore source coming from? Odell, I'm going to give you a tip. And we're going to talk about it in this at the end of this chapter, okay? The underscore source is coming from my field browser. These fields that are not being displayed, how did they get here? I'll talk more about it, but during ingestion, they were extracted. So this count by source is letting me use this field, even though it's not displayed, it's available for me. We're using the underscore because we're using that placeholder mechanism, okay? The underscore is telling it a placeholder, okay? So we're gonna count by source. This is gonna do a couple things when we run this over the last 15 minutes. So what it does, ladies and gentlemen, is one, in my messages tab, again, I still have my messages tab, but it creates and generates an aggregates tab, okay? And it's giving me a count by my items. It says counting by source, okay? Now, let's take this a bit further here. Let's go ahead and go back to our lab guide and let's highlight in number 2 the bottom 2 rows. We just want the last 2 rows because the top row is the same. Okay, copy those. And let's go back to our CIP. Let's highlight the last row of code and paste. I am going to comment out the very last row, the very last 2 rows, because I want you to see what's happening, okay? So again, running this here, we've ran it several times, so let's go run it again. You guys know what it's going to bring back, both sources, all right? Now, as I mentioned to you very early on during the demos, I ran both the access and the error query separately, so you can see that the messages are formatted differently, all right? So we can see this access message has the IP and the actual timestamp, all right? If I go look for an error, it's gonna be formatted where it has a different formatting, okay? Let me quickly try to go to one of those so you can see. All right. So again, when I get to an error message, you'll see that it formats differently. Okay. So that's why. So notice here, here's one. I see this one has the timestamp first, and there's no IP address in this one. Okay. So there's going to be some that have IP addresses of my error messages and some that don't. So the moral of the story here, ladies and gentlemen, since my IP address is not in the same position in all of my records, I'm going to use, you're going to use, we're going to use a parse regex because it's just looking for a format. So let me read to you how it's read, okay? So it says, continue on, parse regex. Let's create a new field called IP address. Let's look for 1 to 3 digits and a decimal, 1 to 3 digits, a decimal, 1 to 3 digits, a decimal, 1 to 3 digits. That sounds like an IP address to me. So the tool is going to go look for, no matter where it is, that actual formula. Okay, so let's run that for the last 15 minutes. Now you're going to notice in your field browser that you have a new field that's being displayed. It's called IP address. Wait a minute, Odell, where did that come from? Well, when we used the parse regex, we declared a new field. It's called IP address. In our results, not only do we now have time displayed and message displayed, we now have a column for IP addresses. Okay. Now, we now want to count by IP addresses. So that next line says, continue my expression, count by IP address. Well, what did IP address come from, Odell? It came from the parse regex when we declared it, okay, over the last 15 minutes. So we have our original messages tab. And since we have a count by, we now have an aggregates tab. We're seeing the IP address and the amount of messages from each IP address. Okay. Now let's take it a step further. We only want to see where our counts are greater than 500. Let's stay right here. We need to add one more line of code. How do we add another line, Odell? Well, depending on where you want to add the line, you and I want to add it at the very bottom. So let's place our cursor at the end of the count by IP address. Let's place our cursor there. And let's use the shift return, shift enter, okay? You don't have to do it twice. I did it twice just to give you visibility. It's not mandatory, all right? And then we can paste. Whoops, that's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to type, sorry. And now we're going to start out with a where clause. So after the count, we're starting with the where, and we'll use the underscore because we're going to use that count by, that count, okay? So we're using that placeholder technique. So yours should read pipe where space underscore count space is greater than 500. Odell, I'm lost. What are we doing here? Well, we're trying to find out the IP addresses that have more than 500 counts, okay? 500 messages coming from the IP address, okay? So let's go ahead and run this. These are the IP addresses that have more than 500 messages, okay? All right, let's go back to the CIP, excuse me, the lab guide. All right, so we did 1, 2, and 3. And now let's go ahead and we need to display 3 into a pie chart. So let me go back. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, in order to display your results in any type of chart, you need an aggregate. So we can see on our aggregates page, over to the right, there's a bunch of symbols. Those icons allow us to display our actual results in a chart. We're going to make it a pie chart. And there we have it. Okay. If we wanted to see the numeric values, we can always click on the very first icon. And now we're back at the numeric values. Okay. All right, now back to the lab guide. Let's grab number 4. Under number 4, let's grab what's under number 4. Here, we're going to identify the top 10 IP addresses by bandwidth usage. This will require parsing the byte size as well as the source IPs. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy this. Let's go ahead and go back to our CIP, create a new log search, and paste. I'm going to walk you through this one as well. We'll take a break in a second here. All right, so let me demonstrate a technique that you may not be aware of. You know that we can go row by row and comment out row by row. But if I have 40, 50, 20, 30, whatever, I have a large amount of code, a large number of rows. I don't want to go row by row to comment out. So here's the technique, all right? On my Mac, I'm holding down the Options key. If you're not on a Mac, you're going to use the Alt key. When I place my cursor to the left of the pipe symbol and hold down my Options key, I can drag, left mouse drag a line to the left and let go. I'll do it again. So I can click to the left of the first pipe, hold down my Options key. My mouse pointer changes, okay? I can then drag by holding my left mouse down, drag a row all the way down, and you see a blinking line to the left of the line. Now, anything I type will be applied to all lines. So this is going to save me and you from having to go line by line, row by row, and comment out each row. Okay, I just wanted to show you that. We'll do it again coming up later. So we're looking at our access log messages. This first row could actually be an actual just a parse, because we're only going against one source and all of our IP addresses are formatted in the messages the same. But anyhow, we're using a parse regex. We're declaring a new field called IP address. It's looking for that combination, 1 to 3 digits, okay? And I'm gonna run it for the last 15 minutes. So again, it goes and finds the IP address, all right? The next statement is a parse anchor, okay? The parse anchor is definitely gonna filter out. The parse anchor says, look for the value of 200. So once you find 200, the next field after that, parse out and call it size. So it's going to go and look for all of these messages. It's going to look for 200s. It's going to bring those back only. There's other numbers here as well. So you're going to see that it's going to filter out. Okay, the number is going to decrease. So we run that for the last 15 minutes. So we're down to 5,000 items. We're looking at 1 of 216. It filtered out the size where there was a size, okay? The next item is going to use that aggregate where it's summing. Now we created an alias name on our parse. So once we parsed out that new value, we called it size. We're then going to use the size to sum. We're going to create a new field called total bytes, okay? This sum is going to give us an aggregates tab. So let's run that. Again, I see my messages tab. See the size and IP address have been parsed. I have an aggregates tab because of the sum. I'm seeing the IP address and the total bytes by IP address. Okay. And then the last line of code is allowing you to use the top operator. Now, some of our operators sort in descending order by default, okay? This is one of those operators, okay? We're saying we want the top and supplying the number 10 IP addresses. Remember, we created that IP address off of the first parse regex, okay? So we're gonna only bring back the top 10 IP addresses by total bytes, okay? And it, by default, is gonna sort it in descending order. So you can see your numbers go down in descending order. Of course, let me go over this. If you wanted it in ascending, you would, of course, put at the end of the line ASC, or you could, of course, click on the column header and change the sort order as well, okay? All right, going back. All right, so there aren't any lab questions after this one, any exercise question after this lab guide. So let's go ahead and insert our 5-minute break. I'll put up the timer and I'll see you in 5. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you had an opportunity to get away from the monitor, get some water, breathe, stretch, exhale. All right, let's get back to, I think I closed out. Yeah, I think I did. Let's get back to our environment. Let me bring up my labs again. I think I closed them out. We should be on lab 3. So in the bottom right link, make sure you go ahead and click on lab 3. That's where we are. I'll get there shortly. Lab 3, parsing options. All right, pin this puppy again. All right, there you go. All right, now lab 3 here. We're going to continue with the conversation of parsing, okay? And one of the benefits of using our continuous intelligence platform, of using our tool, is that when you have JSON records, our tool has an option that's turned on automatically. It allows for auto parsing of your JSON messages. Basically, this allows you to view your fields from your JSON logs without having to parse them out, okay? This dynamic parsing option is going to extract your fields, your JSON fields, when you run a query at search time, okay? So you're going to see the advantage of this after. Let's grab number 1. You're going to take advantage of this here, nice feature that the continuous intelligence platform has. Let's highlight the code under number 1. Copy that. Let's go back to the CIP, create a new log search. Okay. And let's paste. Okay. I am going to comment out the count by line, and we're just going to run this for the last 15 minutes. So we're going against our CloudTrail logs. Okay. Now let's first get, take a peek's view of this. So looking at our logs, we see in our messages the time and the message is going to display. We see the time. But if we take a look at our messages, these are formatted entirely differently than what we saw in other lab examples. So this is a JSON file, and what we see here is the key and the value, the key and the value, the key and the value. Now, in this continuous intelligence platform, in the query area, in the top right corner, there's a gear symbol to the right of the blue run button. There's a gear symbol. That gear symbol has 2 options in it. One of them is the auto parse mode, and that's turned on automatically for you, so you can take benefit of that. All right, so what it's doing is it's going to extract your key items and make those appear in your field browser. So for example, I see in this very first messages, there's the key user identity, but I see a little arrow. It has some items underneath it. So there's some more, and when I click on that, I see some more key and value items. Well, since this parsing option is on, I don't have to right click on it, any of these items, and say parse selected key. I don't have to do that. Why? Because the tool, if I go down in my field browser and I go down to my user identity, those fields are already here for me because they were parsed out when we ran that item. Okay. Odell, I still don't see the advantage of what you're talking about. Okay. Just watch then. I am going to turn this option off. Okay. I am going to rerun that CloudTrail for the last 15 minutes. You don't need to do this. I want to demonstrate. So now I still have my messages. I still have my time and my message. I see the key and the value. But if you notice in my field browser, I only have these fields. Now these fields were ingested, were filtered out during ingestion time. Okay. So these fields were done different. They were off of field extraction rules. So this parse option, this auto parse option is not working. So I would have to manually go here and right click, click on, and then right click and go to parse selected keyword. So again, just demonstrating the advantages, or one of the advantages that you have in our tool is that auto parsing for your JSON files. Okay, so again, I'll rerun that again, and of course, it now has all of those fields in my field browser. The next item here, the next row of code is going to suggest that we count by our AWS region. Now, how do we know to even use AWS region? Let's say we have no idea what regions we have, okay? Well, utilizes the benefit of the auto parsing. We can go down into our field browser and we can look at our AWS region, okay? Oh, we can look over here in our actual AWS region, and there it is as well. So if I click on it, if I just click on the word, not the box, I get that breakdown that I demonstrated to you guys early. So I can see I have West, East, and so forth, and I can see the percentages. But this is only bringing back region, AWS region, all of them, I should say. Okay. So if we run that, we're going to get a new aggregate tab because we have a count by, and we'll see the counts by the regions. Okay, so again, keep that under that feather under your hat there, because it's going to be important for you when it comes to those JSON files. All right, let's highlight everything here after the labs. We want to go look at our arrows again. And I don't want to have to go copy and paste. We can just type that in. So we want source category equal to labs, Apache case insensitive / error. Again, you can also click on it if you wanted to as well. That works, doesn't matter. So we want to get our labs Apache error. We're going to introduce you to the no drop. So I'm right on number 2 now. And I'm going to go ahead and right click and open this in a new tab for you to see the no drop. Okay. What the no drop? Now, first of all, realize that when you parse, it filters out. So when I use a parse, it's looking for that expression. And if it doesn't find it, it filters it out. There may be a scenario where you want the parse expression not to filter out everything, okay? So you might need to see. So the no drop function option allows the tool to ignore the actual expression and bring back the results as well, okay? So let's go back to our CIP. You should already have in your query there the source category labs Apache error, okay? Now, when we run that, of course, ladies and gentlemen, you know that our Apache error messages are formatted different than our access messages. They start out with a timestamp, the word error, modlog SQL in some instances, error, client IP address in others. So when there's not a public IP address, you're going to see a modlog SQL message, okay? These are our error messages. We're looking at over 1,000 pages. I'm looking at page 1 of so many, okay? Now, we're going to go back to our CIP. Excuse me, I keep saying that. Let's go back to our lab guide, and let's copy the under number 3, the parse statement. Let's go ahead and copy that. Go back to the CIP. We want to add a new line, a new blank line. In order to add a new blank row, you place your cursor at the end of the prior row, and you use the Shift Enter or Shift Return or Alt Enter or Alt Return. One of those two should work for you. I'm going to do it twice, and I'm going to paste. You don't need to do it twice. I just do it for readability. So of these error messages, the tool is now saying, continue on with the pipe statement. It's saying find client. Once you find client, the next field after that is going to be called client IP. So let's take a look at some of these. My very first message, I don't see client. So of course, this does not meet the parsing, so it's not going to display in my final results. It's going to be parsed out. Okay, the next statement, there it is. There's client. The next field after that, I'm going to call IP. Okay, here's another one, and so forth and so on. So this, the parse is going to filter out. Maybe you're in testing and you want to test to make sure that your query is running successfully with the parse statement. So you can see my results are a lot less than what I had before. I'm looking at only 948 results. If you recall, when I ran this without the parse statement, I had over 1,800 results. So you can see the number is decreasing because it's filtering out with that parse statement. If it doesn't meet the criteria, you won't see it. Okay. So here it is. Okay. Now, not that each criteria is correct, because we do see error, we do see client, but we see some type of unformatted value, but it still follows the actual pattern. Okay. Now, what you and I can do is go ahead and type a space after the actual end of the parse statement and type in the word no drop. It's one word, no drop. So what this is going to do is tell me, hey, bring back all of the messages, even though it doesn't meet the criteria. Okay. So that sort of brings me back to my original statement of all of the messages. But this would be a good instance. I still have the client IP. I can now identify, oh, so these are instances where we don't have an IP address. Maybe these are public IP addresses, private IP addresses. Okay. All right, let's go grab that last line of code. We're going to parse one more time. Number 4 is where I am. Number 4, let's copy that code. It's not the last line, but let's copy that code. Let's add a new line by using the Shift Enter or Alt Enter, and let's paste. Now this statement is now saying, okay, it still has the no drop, but it's now saying, okay, parse, look for the word mod log SQL colon, and the next field after that is going to be called message. Okay, so of these 1,700 messages, find the ones that have mod log SQL and put them in a new column called message over the last 15 minutes. So you can go ahead and conclude that when there isn't a message, there should be an IP. And when there isn't an IP, there should be a message. Okay, all of these are our error logs. We use parse statements as well as the no drop. Okay, let's continue on with this lab. We should be now on number 5. We now only want to see where there is no IP address. We're using the is blank. So we want to see where there isn't an IP address. So let's go ahead and copy that. Good question. Yen asks, will the no drop apply to all parse? Again, the no drop only applies to the parse that you have it on. So in other words, it's only going to apply to this line. Okay, good question. All right, we've copied that message. You're welcome. The last line of code, that where, let's copy that. Let's go back to our CIP, add a new line, and let's paste. So this last line is saying, hey, where the client IP, remember we created that client IP column, where that has a blank. Okay, so wherever that is, bring that back. All right, and that's going to bring back all of our messages, basically. So where you don't see an IP, you see the message. Okay. Again, we're demonstrating functionality. Hopefully you're thinking in your mind some of the things that you might have to do. We want you to remember these techniques, okay? All right, let's continue on here, ladies and gentlemen. I want to read this twice in case it appears on an exam. Number 6, the parsed field option allows you to do further parsing on an already extracted field. The parse field option allows you to do further parsing on an already extracted field, okay? So let's go ahead. We want to identify our top 5 committers of our GitHub over the last 30 days. So under number 6, let's highlight and copy that. Let's go back to our CIP and create a new log search and paste. Let's go ahead and go to our time and change it to 30 days, the last 30 days. I am going to comment out the parse statement so you can see just the GitHub data. Now, it's bringing back our GitHub logs. It's also using a keyword. Only our GitHub log messages that have the word committer in them over the last 30 days. All right. So we can see here, we have our message and we have the word committer highlighted in these messages as we scroll through them, okay? The next statement is asking us to find the email address. So it's saying parse, look for the phrase email. And once we find that phrase email, the next field after that, so here's an example. So it's looking for email colon. Once it finds that, the next field after that, we're going to call it email. Okay, so we're parsing out the email of these committer messages and creating a new column called email over the last 30 days. All right, so we can peruse through here. Again, we should have a column that has some sort of value there where it looks like an email address or not, but it has a value because it found the pattern and parsed the object out. Okay, let's continue on. We now want to use the parse field option to further parse the email address into user and domain. Then we want to count by user and then identify the top 5 users. So let's go ahead and highlight the last 3 lines under number 7, the last 3 lines of code under number 7. Let's go ahead and highlight that and copy. Let's go back to the CIP. Let's go ahead and add a new row, shift return or shift enter, and let's paste. I am going to comment out the last 2 lines of code. Again, you know, we're going for our GitHub. We want all of our committer messages. You and I have already parsed out the email address already. The next parse is using the field operator and saying parse field equals email. So it's telling me what field we want to parse. It's saying before the ampersand, call it user. After the ampersand, call it domain. So I'm going to have 2 more columns called user and domain based on the already parsed email over the last 30 days. Take a look at our field browser. We have domain, email, and user added. Again, email, user, and domain based off of our parsing statements. We now have our domain column that brings out the domain, our email column that has the initial object, and then the actual user that has the name, okay? The next statement here, we want to count by our users, okay? Notice we're not using that placeholder mechanism because that user field was created on our parse statement. So we're just going to get, now we're going to get an aggregate because we have that count, okay? And over the last 30 days. My question, my auto parsing is turned on there, Greg. So mine is not turned off, mine is turned on. All right, so here's our fields. We see that we have our count bys, we have an aggregate tab, here's our users, and the amount of GitHub messages, committer messages they have, okay? We actually want the top 5. Remember that top operator is one of those operators that's going to sort in descending order by default. We're telling it we want our top 5 users by underscore count. We're utilizing that placeholder technique, the underscore count, because of course the count is an operator. So we run that over the last 30 days. Yours might still be running like mine. You can still run it. And there you have it. These are the top 5 users that have the largest amount of committer messages. Okay. All right, going back to the lab guide. We're on number 8. Now, we want to utilize the multi in our parse statements. What if we have error messages that have more than one IP address? We want to be able to parse out all of those IP addresses. By default, ladies and gentlemen, the parses out the first occurrence. Okay, again, here it tells you by default, just so you'll remember, parse only extracts the first occurrence. Okay, so you and I are going to get around that. Let's highlight the entire code under number 8. Under number 8, let's highlight that and copy that. Go back to the CIP. Let's create a new log search and let's paste. And okay, we'll leave it there. All right, let's change this to 60 minutes. Okay. All right, so I'm going to comment out so you can see we're going to get our snort logs, so you might not be aware of what snort logs look like. So I want to make sure you see the actual data before we parse out. So in our snort logs, if I look at the message here, it's a classification. It has one IP address, and it also has another IP address. Okay. The next statement is a parse regex, and from what we just read, you know that it's going to only parse the first occurrence. So this says parse regex. Let's declare a new field called IP underscore address. Let's look for this format, okay, over the last 60 minutes. So when we run this, just as you thought, the tool gives you results. It gives you that new column called IP address. It filters out only the first occurrence. So here's that 188.126, but where's my 1030.170? It's not on the next line. That gives me the first one of the next line and so forth. So we want to add a space, type in the word multi, okay? Well, if you have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 IP addresses, we want them all filtered out. So we run that over the last 60 minutes. And if we take a look at the first row, okay, so it's 207. Okay, so there's the first occurrence, 207. Where's my 1024? Oh, on the next row. Here's my 1024, and so forth and so on. Okay, so again, that multi gives that ability to, in the parse statements, allow you to search multiple items. All right, back to the lab guide. All right, just let's highlight under number 10. I'm going to speak to the field extraction rules. Okay, just highlight under number 10, copy that. Let's go back and create a new log search. And let's paste. Now, if we take a look at, I'm going to comment out the count. If we take a look at just the first line of code and run it, it's letting us know that we want to go get our access log messages and we want our status codes of 404s. So all of the 404s, these are all 404s, okay? Now, how did you and I know that we can use a field called status codes? Because in our field browser, we have this item, status code. Well, Odell, how did these items get in your field browser? That brings us to this topic. You can just watch, ladies and gentlemen. You don't need to do anything. You can just watch. So in our navigation panel, if I go to my manage data and go to my logs, I have an object called field extraction rules. Now we're analysts. We won't be able to create these. When you come back to take the admin class, you'll see how to create these. Okay. So here's our field extraction rules. I'm going to open up one and I'm going to read through it so you can kind of get an understanding of what's being done. All right. So we called it demo FER. The status is it's enabled. So that means it's running. Okay. When is it going to be applied, Odell? At ingestion time. Okay, so as your messages are being ingested into Sumo Logic, the scope of Labs Apache Access. So these messages at ingestion time are going to have a parse, and they're going to parse out these fields. The benefit of that is we don't have to go to our records and parse out because they're already here based on the field extraction rules. So this is something that an administrator would create as you guys are getting together and you're starting to get your sources together, what you want to go into Sumo Logic, okay? He or she are going to say, hey, let's make this tool run more efficient for us. Since you're going to be searching through all of these records, whether they're logs, metrics, or traces, you're going to be searching through them. Let's give you a benefit here. Let's parse out fields so you don't have to. So that's what a field extraction rules allows us to do. So instead of us having to parse out, we can utilize these fields in our query without having to parse, okay? Anyhow, so going back to our message here, we're now going to go ahead and count by source IP. Well, how did we know to use source IP? If you look in your field browser, you can use these fields. You can use them, okay? So here's my source IP. I just used it in my count by. And of course, I'll get an aggregate. And I'll see all of my access messages that have a status code of 404. I'm counting by those IP addresses. All right, good job. All right, let's wrap it up here. Let's go over our true and false statements. Question number 1. CSV, JSON split key value are all parsing operators. True or false? Don't go use this help Sumo logic. I told you guys this already. True or false? Ooh, Abby, is that your final answer? Good job, Greg. Greg. Yeah, it's true, ladies and gentlemen. If you're not familiar with parsing operators, go out to the Sumo Logic help. Go help.sumologic.com and search for parsing operators. There's a whole sheet of different types of operators. These are only just 4 of them. There's a bunch more, okay? Number 2, once a field has been parsed, it can't be parsed any further. Correct. You guys are all correct. It's false. Remember, I read that statement for you twice. Number 3, field parsed by field extraction rules are available in the field browser. Philip, yep. Greg, yep. True. That's true, ladies and gentlemen. That's the benefit of the field extraction rule, to make that field visible for me so I can use it in my query. All right, let's go ahead and do the conditional explorer on lab number 4. Excuse me, conditional operations in lab number 4. All right, so here we want to use conditional operators that allow us to benefit off of the if-then operation, okay? We want to return the number of successful requests where the status codes are 200 versus the number of error requests where the status codes are 400. Let's copy everything under number 4. Highlight and copy everything under number 4. Let's go ahead and create a new log search for the last 60 minutes. Let's paste. I, of course, have got to comment out so we can walk through the code here. All right, so for the last 60 minutes, we want to bring back our access log messages. Those messages from our access log messages, we want to look for and parse out the status code. So we're going to look for the HTTP/1.1. Okay. The next field after that should be our status code. Okay, so it's going to go there and find the status codes. So again, this is going to parse out our status codes over the last 60 minutes. We have a new column called status codes. In our field browser, we have a new display field. So all of our status codes are filtered out. Okay, if it didn't have a status code, it wouldn't be here. All right. Now we want to go through here and find out if our status code equals 200. Okay, we want to create a new column called successes. We're going to put a 1 for it being true and a 0 for it being false in that successes column based on whether it's a 200 or not. Okay, over the last 60 minutes. So we have a new column called successes. It evaluates the status code. It puts a 1 in there if it's true, puts a 0 in there if it's false. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to look for 404s. So if the status code equals 404, we're going to create a new column called client errors. We're going to put a 1 in it if it's true, put a 0 in it if it's false. Okay, over the last 60 minutes. So we now have a new column called successes and errors, the client errors. The client errors column has a 0 where you see it not being 400. But once you get to a 400, it has a 1 in it. Okay. And here's another technique, ladies and gentlemen. I showed you this before. We can just click on the actual name status code, even though it's checked, we can just click on the name and we can see the breakdown of what we have. So we have over 2,300 200s and we have 965 404s. Okay. All right, the next statement here is going to go ahead and create 2 more columns. It's going to create a success count where we're going to sum our successes. And remember, successes was created off that if statements for the 200s. We're also going to sum our client errors, okay? And we're going to call that client error count. This sum is going to generate an aggregates tab over the last 60 minutes. And we can see that we have a count of 23,000 versus a client count of 900, okay? Now, I'm not going to go over the optional test your knowledge in lab number 4, but I am going to speak to it. The difference between these two is that one is using an equal, where we're equating it to a value, and the other one is using a matches and a wildcard, where it's going to match where it sees anything beginning with 4, 400, 450, 41 million. So again, that's the major difference. We're using a matches and an asterisk versus an equal. Okay, you can do that one in your leisure if you like. Let's go ahead and go to lab 5 using a subquery to filter. Some of you may be familiar with SQL. Some of you may be familiar with SQL. Okay, and you might know about a subquery. That inner query, whatever value is brought back for that inner query, is going to be used for the outer query. That's the same premise here, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to do this in 3 steps. Okay. So let's say that we want to run our source category labs and the IP address to identify all of our Apache messages. Okay. However, we'd like to automatically change that IP address to one with the most file doesn't exist errors. Okay. So in order to do that, we're going to create a child query that brings back all of our file doesn't exist errors. And we're going to use that IP address as a keyword for our parent query. Okay. You'll see it as we go through it. So let's scroll down to number 1. Let's highlight number 1, copy it, go back to the CIP, create a new log search. Let's run this for the last 15 minutes. You guys know what this is. We're just bringing back our access messages. All right. Now, we want to use a keyword, but we don't know what the keyword is going to be. Okay. So let's go back to our lab guide. Let's highlight everything under number 2. Everything under number 2, please. This is going to be our child query. So let's copy that. Go back to our CIP. Let's create a new log search, a new one. You still have the old one there. You're going to just leave it there. And let's paste. Now we want to do, let's see here. Yep, that looks good. All right, so I want to comment out these lines so you can see what's going to happen. All right. All right. So the first one says, hey, let's bring back all of our error messages and let's use the keyword file doesn't exist. So that's the first thing it's doing. So it's looking in our error log messages and looking for the word file doesn't exist. It found 17 occurrences in my environment. Okay. File doesn't exist, file doesn't exist. You might be aware that the IP addresses are it's the same. Okay. The next statement is parsing out. So we actually want to parse out the IP address, the time, and the error. So if I look at the first message, it's going to parse the timeout, the word error, and the IP address. That's what this parsing is doing. Okay. Over the last 15 minutes. So we now have a column called error and a column called IP address, along with the time and message. All right. As you can see, these are all the same IP addresses. Right? Don't worry about the count, the number of items. The next item is going to count up by IP address. So we're going to get one number for this IP address over the last 15 minutes. Okay, so there's one IP address. It's a total of whatever number it is. Great. Okay. Now, this last line of code, let me explain it to you. Okay. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, in our training environment, this message only appears for one IP address, okay? If we had multiple IP addresses, we could use the top K, which would rank our items, okay? So that top K is for ranking. But ladies and gentlemen, we don't have more than one. So we could have just not used that at all. But anyhow, just be aware the top K is for ranking, okay? So it would give us the most IP addresses with the most file, but we only have one, okay? We'll run it anyway. It's rank number 1, okay? Anyhow, now we want to take this code and our parent code and bring them together so that it uses this IP address as a keyword for the parent. Odell, I have no idea what you're talking about. Let's go back to our lab guide. Under number 4, highlight everything under number 4. Highlight everything under number 4 and copy it and go back to the CIP. Create a new log search. This is the completed query. Okay, so paste it. We might have to clean it up a bit, ladies and gentlemen. You might have to clean it up a bit. So I want to put this, for example, this compose, I want to put that on a new line. Okay. So let's break it down. Here's our parent query. Hey, bring back all of my access messages. We want to use our child query as a subquery. So we're using the keyword subquery. Now, after that bracket subquery colon, after that, everything up to the closing paren is our child query. Remember, source category equals error, find the keyword file doesn't exist, parse out the time there and the IP address, count by the IP address, give me a top count. Okay, so again, this phrase, bracket subquery colon, right after that is the child query. Okay, we continue on. The last statement is using the compose operator, and it's telling you, hey, compose the IP address as a keywords, okay? So this tool is going to take the IP address from this child query and use it as a keyword over the last 15 minutes. So you can see that same IP address is being used. We're bringing back all of our access messages that are related to that error message. Okay, so again, it's just utilizing that subquery and the actual compose keyword. These three items are the key things if you want to do subqueries. The word subquery in the colon, the compose, and the keyword. Okay. All right, let's click on and go on. Be aware, ladies and gentlemen, at your leisure, you can find more information on subqueries by going out. You can go to the help and do subqueries, or you can click on the link in your lab guide. Okay, you and I are going to go ahead on to lab number 6. We're going to plot our clients on a map. Okay, now I briefly talked about this in my fundamentals course. So if you have my fundamentals, you're sort of aware of this. But if you haven't, here's a refresher. All right, I'm going to click on this. You don't need to do this. Just open this in a new tab real quick. The geo lookup. So, ladies and gentlemen, you and I utilizing our tool, our Sumo Logic Continuous Intelligence Platform, utilizing our tool, you have the benefit of a relationship we have. New star populates a table for us. We need to give new star the IP address. When we give new star the IP address, when it looks it up in that table that new star populates, it's going to give us the latitude, the longitude, and the count. There are other fields that we can retrieve as well in that table. But the key thing here, first of all, is, again, we have a relationship with Newstar. They provide us with a table. that they populate, we go query that table by providing an IP address, and it returns us this information. Okay. All right, now going back to our actual lab guide, we are going to go ahead and plop items on a map. Let's highlight everything under number 2. And let's copy that. And let's create a new log search in our CIP. And paste. All right, now let's kind of break it down. I like doing it. I know you're probably like, oh, Dale, this is repetitive. But again, repetition helps you learn. All right. So again, we're going to get to our access logs over the last 15 minutes. We're parsing out, we're looking for the IP address. So this parse is looking for a format here. It's saying, look for the dash dash. Okay. Once you find that dash dash, here it is, the dash dash. The item before that, parse out and call it IP address. Just looking for the dash dash, found the IP, it's going to parse it out over the last 15 minutes. Now, we see in our field browser, we have a new column being displayed called client IP. Here it is, here's the column, okay? The next statement, again, the best practice here is to read this from right to left. The best practice is read it from right to left. So we are providing the client IP and going to look it up in that geolocation table that NewStar populates. Once we provide that IP in that table, we want to bring back the latitude and the longitude, okay, over the last 15 minutes. So we have a new column called client IP, we have a new column called latitude and longitude, okay? Now, the next statement says, hey, go ahead and count up all my latitudes and longitudes. Okay, so you know that is going to generate an aggregates tab for us. So we can see here the latitude and longitude and the count of messages from them, okay? Here's that sort. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. Again, I talked about you can just click on the column headers and sort, but there's a sort and an order by. You could use those as well. We're sorting by count. We're using that placeholder feature. We're using the underscore because count is an operator. So we're going to count by that. Sort by that, pardon me. So it's sorting in descending order. Again, how did it know? By default, sort is in descending order. If you want to change that, you can type in ascending. Since we have the latitude, the longitude, and the count, in our aggregates tab, we have this icon that's available to us, the map icon. We can click on it. Now all of our actual latitude and longitudes are now displayed on a map. And of course, you can zoom in by using your scroll bar. You can drag by holding your mouse down, double click, etc., etc. Okay. Should go down to street level. Question says, how granular can we go? You look down to the street level, Greg. All right. We did that. All right. You have optional knowledges that you can try on your own. I'll leave those for you under optional test your knowledges. Number 1, 2, and 3. You can do that on your own. More practice for you. Okay. Let's keep going. We're going to go to lab 7, calculating changes in moving averages. So we're going to talk about 2 new operators. We're going to talk about the diff. Okay. The diff operator is, of course, going to calculate the rate of change in a field between consecutive rows. So it's a difference of rows, basically, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and highlight everything under number 1. We're going to run this for the last 15 minutes. So let's copy that. Go back to the CIP, log search, paste. I'm going to comment out everything using my options key, Odell. I have to tell that guy Odell, sometimes he forgets. Anyhow, so the last 15 minutes, I'll run my access messages. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you, I want you to use the time slice, but just be aware, if you have the time slice and you run your query with all the other rows commented out, it's not going to change anything. That time slice doesn't really render until you actually have a aggregates page, okay? All right, so speaking of aggregates, the next line of code is going to count by my time slice. Notice it's using that feature underscore because time slice is a operator, okay? So we run that over the last 15 minutes. We now have a count by. Now the time slice makes sense now. I can see a minute by minute breakdown. But again, they're in no type of order here. We of course could click on the column header, but you and I already have in our code a sort by. So we're going to sort by time slice. Again, we're using the underscore, and we've also hard coded the word ASC because by default, the sort is going to sort in descending order over the last 15 minutes. So you and I are now seeing the minute by minute breakdown of the count of messages. So the first minute I had 6 to 160, second minute and so forth. Now we want to use the diff operator to give us a difference between the first row and the second row and the third, and so forth and so on. Okay, let's run that over the last 15 minutes. You should see a new column. The very first row, you're not going to see any value in the diff because there's nothing above it. Okay, but if you take the value in the first row count and you subtract it from the second row, you should get a value. The reason it's negative because the second row is larger than the first row. If you take the second row and subtract it from the third row, you get a value, okay? And so forth and so on. So you're getting the difference here, okay? You might want to, in some instances, show that difference on a line chart. You have that capability as long as you have an aggregates tab here, okay? Let's see here. All right. Let's grab before we grab it, let me talk about the smooth operator. Somebody told me I was a smooth operator. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at it. So the smooth is going to give you the actual averages of a field. Okay, so you're going to get the rolling or moving averages of a field. And that's what we want to be able to see. Okay. All right, let's go ahead back to our lab guide and grab what's under number 2. Everything under number 2, please. We're going to create a new log search. And paste. Okay, I am going to comment out just the smooth operator. You guys should be aware that we're bringing back our access messages where the status code is 404. We want to render our results in 1-minute buckets. We want to count by our error count and create a, count by our time slice and create a new field called error count. We're going to also sort by our time slices in ascending order. Okay. So those first 4 lines you should be somewhat familiar with. Again, we have our messages tab. What we did here was we created a time slice. We wanted 1-minute increments. We counted and we sorted. So we're sorting by our actual time slice in ascending order. Okay. The last thing here we're going to do here is we want to calculate our error counts as a rolling average using our smooth operator over the last 15 minutes. So here we can see a minute by minute breakdown. I had the error count. Okay, and if you add these 2 numbers in the first 2 rows and divide by 2, so 9 and 18 is 27 divided by 2, you give it 1350. You add the 3 numbers up, divided by 3, get that number, 4 numbers, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. Okay, now Looking at the numbers is great. We can see our error counts and our rolling averages, but sometimes visualizations are much easier to understand and grasp. So you and I can go ahead and choose any type of chart that we want, but in this case, let's go ahead and choose a line chart. So here we have two numbers, our error counts and our rolling averages. It's sort of difficult to kind of distinguish between those. So one technique that we have, if you go to the gear symbol in your aggregates tab and you go to your change series, you see the error count. Right now, it's a chart type of a line. We can click that line chart and make it a column. So this is the example of when you have multiple points on a chart where you can change the actual display options. So we click save. Now we can see our actual error counts over the rolling averages on a minute by minute basis. Okay. All righty, awesome. Let's continue on, ladies and gentlemen. You guys are doing wonderful. Hang in there with me. Got a couple more. Let's go into lab 8. We want to find the needle in the haystack. Find the needle in the haystack. Some of you may be familiar with this already, but the log reduce is some of that machine learning, some of those analytical tools that I referred to earlier. Okay. You may have used the log reduce where you found that it is going to look through your messages and find patterns. So you'll be able to find those anomalies. So again, it's going to find those patterns to reduce you looking through all of those messages. Okay. All right, let's highlight what's under number 1. We're going to go against our snort logs. We want to, in a new search, run a log reduce on our snort logs, security data to identify unusual activity, intrusions. So that's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and run this in a new log search in our CIP and paste. I am going to comment out the log reduce so you can see the actual code, the actual results from the snort logs. So if we just take a look, a visualization of our logs here, you can see they have classifications. So there's an attempted information leak, there's a web application attack, user privilege, web application, and so forth. Okay. Right now I have over 1,500 messages. I have one of 62 pages. If I'm looking for a specific item or something like that, it's sort of difficult or challenging going through 62 pages, okay? I can either A, uncomment this log reduce, or B, just click on the word log reduce, okay? What it is doing, it's going through all of those 1,000+ messages, and it's grouping them together based on patterns, okay? So again, that took about 11 seconds for me. It's done. I still have those 1,000+ messages. I have a messages tab, okay? But now I also have a signatures tab where it has grouped and said, hey, Odell, yours might not say, hey, Odell, but it says, hey, Odell, this message, web bug port config file, classification attempt information leak appears 812 times. So of those 1,400 messages, this one appears 800 times. This one 145, and so forth and so on. Okay. If you recall yesterday, from some of you that taken the fundamentals course, one of the things that we did was when we used the log reduce, we were able to find out the problem that happened based on the metrics. Now, let's talk about some other things here with this log reduce. Okay. If you notice here, I have some actions, okay? I have a promote and demote. Let's imagine that I work for all of you and I have to give this report to you, then you have to evaluate it. Let's imagine that, okay? Now, I know the data very well, you know it well as well, so I get the first look at it. And what I can do to save you time is I can either promote or demote the message, okay? So for example, I can say this here attempted information leak. We know that our IT department has a bug fix and we're waiting on that. So this is not really important. So I can click the down arrow to demote that. Notice the relevance is now 0. So I give you this list, you come in, you see, and you look at the relevance, you say, okay, the ones that I have to look at are higher relevancy versus the ones that I don't. So let me put it back to where it was, okay? So let's say, again, I look at this and I say, hey, well, we need to really fix this. This is a problem. I could then promote it. So now it has a higher relevancy. So again, these promote and demote actions control this relevancy, and it's up to your company to determine, whether 10 is high, 1, etc. Okay. That pencil to the right under actions allows you to edit the actual message. Now, in case this appears on an exam, in the log reduce and the signatures tab, you can edit the message, but you cannot delete it. In the log reduce, in the signatures tab, you can edit the signature, but you cannot delete it. Okay. All right. So yeah, that's good. All right. Now, let's remove the log reduce items in our snort. We just want to see source category labs equals snort. Okay. And let's run this again. Okay. So here's our messages. Now, what we'd like to do now is compare today's results to sometime in the past, maybe 24 hours ago, maybe last week, maybe Monday. But again, you and I want to be able to compare if this happened prior. Maybe that lets us know something, okay? So what we're going to do in this example is we're going to go ahead and use the log compare. If you click on that, it automatically populates your query with a pipe, the log compare, the time shift operator, and a value of 24 hours ago. So we're telling the tool, hey, bring back today's messages and also compare them to 24 hours ago, okay? Give me the percentage difference between now and 24 hours ago, okay? So, and I want to change the time here. I'm going to go ahead and bump this up to 3 days, okay? Just to give it more data. It's not mandatory that you do it, but I want to give it more data, okay? So I'm comparing my snort logs today to a time shift of 24 hours ago, okay? And of course, it's going to take long because I used 3 days. So I can go through here and I can see that there's 29,000 of these today. That's a well, it's still going because it's still processing. Sorry. Let me be patient here. I'm trying to hurry up so I can get you guys onto your exam. So just bear with me. So once this processes, we'll see that top value represents today. That bottom value represents the change difference from yesterday, from 24 hours ago, okay? So if I scroll through here, I'll scroll and see percentages, but I'll then come down and see something that says new. That means it wasn't there 24 hours ago when you see a new. You might also see something that says gone. That means it was there, but it's no longer there now, okay? So again, this is still running. My time period probably gives it too much data here. But again, you get the idea. The top value gives you your today's value. The bottom value gives the difference from the 24 hours ago, okay? I also want to talk a little bit more about this log compare. if you click the drop down arrow to the right of the log compare, it allows you to change. The default is 24 hours, but we can change to 7 days, or we can customize it, okay? But when we just click on the button, it's gonna time shift for the last 24 hours, okay? So if I peruse through here, I don't see any gone or any new, but again, I eventually would see those, all right? So that was, we did 8, the log compare, we did step number 1 and number 9. Did number 1. So let's grab under number 3, which should be number 2. Under number 3 in your lab number 9. Under number 3 in your lab number 9. Let's go ahead and copy where the absolute value delta percentage is greater than 25. Let's copy that. And let's add that to the last line of code. So we're going to add a new row and paste. Okay. All right. And let's go ahead and run that for 60 minutes. So that where ABS is where the absolute value percentage is greater than 25. So it's going to look at that bottom number from the 24 hours ago, and it's going to look and find out if it's greater than 25. Now, since it's using the absolute operator, it could be negative 25 or it could be positive 25. You're also going to see some gones and maybe you see maybe some news as well. Just be aware that this absolute is bringing back positive and negative values as well as strings. So you can see the gone. Here's a negative 26. It meets the criteria. It's greater than 25, negative or positive. All right, and then the last statement in number 4 here, the where is new. Remember, I talked about that. Let's copy this, go back to the CIP, and let's replace that where with the where is new. So as I mentioned, that time shift is going to give you a value underneath or a string. So it's either going to give you a percentage or either the word new or gone. We want to look for all of the new ones. Maybe we need to install something because it was new. We didn't install it on that server or something. It could be that, you know. So I'm running that for the last 60 minutes, and hopefully it gets us some data. It should bring back only where it was new, where it didn't exist yesterday, but it is new today. All right, if you didn't get any values, just increase the days. I'll do it for 3 days, just so you can see that you're going to get some values, okay? All right, while that's running, let's continue on. There's no questions at the end of this lab, so we're going to go ahead and click on lab number 10. We want to identify out of the ordinary events by utilizing the outlier. Okay, I'm going to get there in a second. I want to make sure this comes back. It will. So let me open up this outlier to kind of give you some high-level description of what it is. So that outlier has 4 parameters that needs to be set. Okay, it has the window, which calculates the mean and the standard deviation. It has the threshold that calculates any standard deviations for calculating the violations. Okay. It has a consecutive that tells you the consecutive indicates the data points. How many outliers do you want to see? Okay. And the direction is going to allow you to see above the threshold and below the threshold. The plus is above, the minus is below. If you have plus and minus, you'll see both above and below threshold items. Okay, so those are the 4 parameters or arguments that have to be satisfied with our outliers. All right, so that thing still didn't finish. Okay, I'm going to kill it. I'm not going to go. It's going to come back. All right, let's go ahead and grab under our in our lab guide under number 4. Grab the entire query. We're going to run this for 60 minutes. Pardon me, the last 60 minutes. All right, let's create a new log search. Paste that. All right, so stepping through the code here, we're going against our Apache access logs. We're bringing back our status codes that equal to 404. We're going to render our results in a 1 minute bucket, in 1 minute buckets. We want to count up our status codes and call them error count. And we're counting them up by time slice, okay? And again, we're doing this for 60 minutes. I am commenting out the last line of code so you can at least see the code, the results. So we have an aggregates tab because we're counting our status codes and we're calling them error counts. So a minute by minute breakdown, okay? These minutes are not in any order, ladies and gentlemen, because we don't have an order by, all right? But what we're gonna utilize is the outlier, okay? We are gonna define the outlier of having an error count of 10. So that's how it's gonna calculate the standard deviation. We want a consecutive of 1. That means that it's going to show us where the actual outlier is. Now I'm going to change this to 2. You don't have to do this, ladies and gentlemen. I want to see more numbers. The threshold, I'm going to change that to 1.1. Yes, you can use decimal places. Okay, so I'm going to run this for the last 60 minutes. All right, now let's read and try to understand what's going on. Okay, I'm looking for where I have an error count indicator and an error count violation. So on my line number 7, I see the total error count was 14. That is outside the upper threshold and the lower threshold. 14 is outside. So it gives me a error count indicator and it gives me an error count violation. Since I have my number set to 2, I see also on the next row, there's 23 of them. The upper count is 22, the lower count is 14. Again, that indicates a error count and an outlier, okay? Now the numbers are great, as I mentioned all the time, but this is best displayed in the chart. So let's go ahead and click on our line chart. So the direction controls what you see above and below the threshold. So you see we have a plus and a minus there. So we're seeing above the threshold and below the threshold, okay? We see our threshold has a lot of points on it. We see our consecutive points and we see our threshold, okay? All righty. Let's continue on. Hang in there, ladies and gentlemen, just a couple more. We're almost done. All right, the predict. Again, there's 2 types of predict function operators. There's the linear and there's the auto-aggressive model. We're going to use the linear regressive model where it produces the following outputs: numbers of minutes, predicted simple linear model, as well as the linear model minus the actual numbers. So again, we're using a linear approach for our prediction. Okay, let's go ahead and grab everything under number 3. We're going to run this for 60 minutes in our CIP. New log search, paste, 60 minutes. Let me go over what we're doing here. I'll comment out the last line. You know, we're going against our access messages, bringing back our 404s. We're going to render them in 1 minute buckets. We're going to count up our status codes and call it error count over the last 60 minutes. We have an aggregates tab based on that count. So here's our minute by minute bucket and the amount of error code. All right, the next thing here, we're going to predict. We want to be able to predict and see if this is going to continue to happen in the future. So we're going to utilize some of the features, some of that machine learning that our tool has. So when we run that over the last 60 minutes, we'll see a new column called the predict column. Excuse me, we'll see an error count, the error count predict, and the error count error. Okay, so if we scroll down here and page through here, we'll eventually see that our error count and our error count error numbers no longer appear. Okay, numbers are great. This is better viewed in a chart. So let's go ahead and display it in a line chart. So I can see my prediction is in a trending down. So it's saying in the future that I shouldn't have these many messages. So the prediction is going down. Yours might be going up, but mine is slightly going down. Right, awesome. All right, number 12 here, ladies and gentlemen, number 12. This would be good if you, this here is utilizing the transaction operator. And the transaction operators, if you had a lot of inventory to kind of keep track of, or stages of something, okay, maybe in the mail orders or things like that, okay? So the transaction analytics allows you to see those phases, okay? Let's go ahead and highlight everything under number 3. Let's run this for the last 24 hours in a new log search. All right, let's talk about what it's doing. All right, so the first thing it's doing there is bringing back ecom mark logs. It's parsing out the IP address. If the format is not found, we're not going to drop it. Okay, we're using the transaction operator on the IP address, and it's going to give us the status of these items. And again, we want to do that over the last 60 minutes. Okay, now we're going to get 2 tabs here. We're going to get a messages tab and an aggregates tab. Okay, now if we take a look at the messages tab first, just to kind of give it some context, we can see our statuses are order shipped. There's different statuses that we'll get. I'm going to give it a little bit more time, 24 hours. Okay, so I can see some more data here. So we're going to see different statuses here. Okay, if I go to my messages tab, I see ordered ship, I see confirmations, I see et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now when I go to my aggregates tab, since I'm using that transaction operator, it allows me to utilize the actual diagram here. So I'm clicking on the show diagram on my aggregates tab, and I can see my orders are good, but my shipping and my cart has some issues. So if you can imagine for a second, my wife and I are going to the grocery store. I'm pushing the cart. I grab something, put it in. I turn around, go grab something else. She takes what I grab in and puts it out. So that process is going on. This is the status and this is a state. This is what we're seeing. This is what we can acknowledge here, utilizing that transaction operator. Okay. All right, last one, ladies and gentlemen, last one, creating an alert. What I want to do with you first is share with you a blog post that we kind of, utilize to explain what's the best practice for getting alerted, okay? And I'm going to put that in the chat for you just so you'll have to peruse on your own. But again, you don't want to be alerted for everything. You want to make some meaningful alerts, okay? So this is a good read for you if you want to come back and read that on your own. But again, let's go ahead and finish up with number 13. We are going to go ahead and rather than being alerted on simple counts, we want to learn to create an alert that will notify us when our 404s increase at a higher rate than we normally see our traffics in 200s. So let's highlight everything under number 5. Let's run this query in a new log search. And we can just do it for the last 15 minutes. Let's take a look at the query for a second. All right, so the first line of code, we're looking at our access log messages. We're bringing back our 200s and our 400s. We're going to render this in buckets, 1-minute buckets. We want to create an if statement where we bring back ones and zeros, true and falses in a new column for 200s, true and falses in a new column for 400s. We're then going to sum up everything. We're then going to divide our fail count by our success count, add that to our fail count, and then multiply it by 100 to get a rate percentage. Okay, so I'm going to run that up until this point. So if we look at that failure rate percentage, okay, what we want to do is be able to, here's our actual success counts. Okay, here's our fail count, and here's the percentage. You and I want to create an outlier. Okay, so we'll run it as it is. We'll leave it as 5, 3, 1, and nothing there. Okay. So if we take a look at our failure rate percentage, okay, you might have to scroll over if you're not seeing it. And you'll see a failure rate indicator in some instances. This is, again, a good depiction in a actual line chart. Now, just a few tips, ladies and gentlemen. If you ever want more numbers, you can change your, you can decrease your threshold. You can also decrease your consecutive. Okay, so if I make that 1.1 and increase your time, Odell. All right, now the moral of this story here is we don't want to get alerted for everything here. You know what I'm saying? We don't want to get alerted for everything. Let me get rid of that. All right, there you go. Again, the key thing here is we don't want to be alerted for everything. Okay, so we only want to be alerted where there's an indication. So how do we get that? Okay, so we go back to our CIP, we're going to grab this where clause. This is the key thing here. We want to grab this where clause and add it to our expression where our failure rate percentage is greater than 0. Okay, so if I go back to my just my values, I want it where it's greater than, my failure rate percentage is greater than 0. Okay, so we're going to add a new line of code at the bottom, paste it where my failure rate percentage is greater than 0. So these are the instances where we want to be alerted. These are the only instances. Okay, and just to remind you how to create alert, ladies and gentlemen, we go up to the save as icon in our query, or the 3 dots, click on save as. In the save as screen, you go down to the schedule this search. When you come to the schedule this search, it'll be set to never, which means it's never going to run. You can choose a time period. You can also specify how you want the alert via email. Maybe you want to use a webhook to create a Slack. Maybe you want to do ServiceNow. Again, you have different types of alerting mechanisms. Okay, and you can provide who you want to send it to as well. Okay, again, remember, after you're done, you can always turn it off by going to never, changing the options to never. Okay, all righty here. Questions, ladies and gentlemen, questions. All right, I know there's a lot of information. Hopefully you picked up some great tips here. Now it's time for us to go ahead and take that certification exam. And again, we recommend you take the certification exam after the actual class. It's not mandatory. Again, we want you to take it because it could be still fresh in your minds. Okay. All right, so again, there's going to be 30 questions. I will be here for 60 minutes. You need 75 to pass. It's open slides, labs, and documentation. Don't forget your resource, help.sumologic.com. Okay. I am going to remind you how to take the exam. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, you're still logged into our training environment. You don't want to take the exam in the training environment because your certificate read, congratulations, training analyst number 410. You successfully passed the search mastery exam. We don't want that. So you're going to log out by clicking on in your navigation panel, in the main menu, clicking on your user ID and choosing sign out. Then you're going to go ahead and log into your company's Sumo Logic environment. And you're going to go ahead and click on get certified. Again, that Get Certified is under the certification link on your home tab. So under the certification link on your home tab, click Get Certified. And you and I have just completed the lecture for, we click on Get Certified again once we get to the Learn page here. Click on Get Certified again. As I mentioned, you and I have just completed the lecture for Search Mastery. That's the exam you're going to register for. So you're just going to click on Register for Free and go through the entire 30 questions. Okay, 30 questions, 60 minutes, 75 pass. Good luck. I will put the Uber Eats voucher in the chat window. And again, I will be here for the next hour. If there aren't any questions, again, I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to present to you. Good luck on the exam. I look forward to seeing you in upcoming trainings. And I will cut off my mic.